Welcome to episode 14 of the Inside Real Estate Podcast. Today we have on a client, friend, and great guest, Vince Cyr of the Cyr Team, now of Real Brokerage.
That's correct. Made the move end of February.
So Vince, tell everybody a little bit about yourself. Give us some background on you.
That could be a long story.
Go for it.
Start? We moved down to the Pennsylvania area, Jane and I, about 30 years ago.
Okay.
So I've been doing a lot of, I was in IT consulting, been doing IT consulting for a long time. Moved down here, established our household, raised our family in the Garner Valley area. I think it's a great place to raise a family. And we also thought it was a great location. We had moved from the Western New York area, so clearly the weather is a hell of a lot better here than it is in Buffalo.
I've seen your car on a few of those trips.
Yes. So we also like the location because the proximity to a lot of different things. You got the Jersey Shore, you got New York City, you got the Poconos, you got Washington, D.C., you can hop on a train, you can drive, and it just offers so much. And we really liked the area. I had been coming down here to do some work for SAP, and that's where I got my familiarity with this area. I continued on doing SAP consulting work for quite a bit of time. I had my own consulting company that was doing another branch of software that we did through the mid-2000s. And my focus has really always been on, management consulting, project management, IT, software. And so I have both a consulting type of mindset and technical type of mindset where we're trying to move and put technology in place to help solve problems. That evolved into how we do that now for real estate.
How'd you get into the real estate business?
I got into real estate after my wife, Jane, got into real estate in 2009. So she got to experience all of the downturn. She was wondering why everybody's getting out of real estate as she's getting in. She and I worked together when we had our consulting company. When I sold the consulting company, she wanted to go and try real estate. I was taking another branch of my company differently. Though I'd sold the company, I'd retained the rights to a bunch of software patents. So I was actually, I was doing software licensing of those patents. These are patents that I'm the inventor of. And so I was doing software licensing.
Cool.
And she got into real estate. After probably about 5 or 6 years, she got asked to become a manager of an office.
Okay.
And the structure of that office was such that she was not going to be allowed to sell. And the promises that were made to her about the type of income she was going to be making, the productivity or profitability of the office that she was led to believe turned out to be different. And so she said, you've got to get your license and got to pick up whatever book of business I have, because we're not going to be able to generate the level of income that we thought we were going to. And so I quickly got my license. I got my license in 2 weeks and started to work out of the office that she was managing. And that's how we started working together. We actually started working together as a team when we left that brokerage and went over to Keller Williams.
I can see your IT consulting background. You seem like a very analytical person.
I'm a very analytical person. Many of our clients are analytical, and they appreciate an analytical approach to how either we're going to help them sell their home or how we're going to help them buy a home. That
kind of goes to what they always say. It's the clients you're going to. I always talk about when you could have two realtors that are on paper the same person. Mm-hmm. Stats, this and that, but who they end up working with, buyers and sellers, is going to be who they connect with. So you're saying that your clients are a lot like that. So that's probably, the way you are is probably, what attracts that type of client, would you say?
I would think so. Many of our clients are professionals, and they expect that. Mm-hmm. They expect a professional type of approach to how we're going to work on this. I look at everything from a project. We have a deadline. We have goals. We're going to have tasks. We're going to have risks. We're going to identify how we're going to mitigate those risks, overcome obstacles, and position that home or position that buyer in a way that's going to be as successful as we can do.
That's the way everybody should approach it. Look, I have a handful of rapid fire questions for us to get started.
Sure.
All right. So first one, what's the craziest or most unexpected things that ever happened to you during a showing?
I don't know if it's the craziest. I always get surprised when the seller's there, okay, and we haven't been notified by the agent that the seller's going to be present.
That's always fun.
So we go into the home. I'm thinking that it's going to be empty, and all of a sudden the seller appears. So there's a little level of startling there. The seller knows we were coming, but clearly I wasn't expecting that, nor were my buyers, who I like to prep beforehand if a seller is going to be there.
Yeah. No, I can see that being a little... All right. Common misconception people have about buying or selling.
Besides that they think it's easy.
Yeah.
From the buy side, I think the biggest misconception is that they're going to have, at least in today's market, the choice that they would like. Unfortunately, we don't have choice. So in almost everything we have in our society, and this is really derived from, I think, Amazon, you have a choice. In fact, you probably have many, many choices, maybe too many choices of whatever you want. In the real estate market right now, buyers don't have choice.
Okay.
From the seller's standpoint, sellers don't appreciate how much work is needed to prepare a home and get it ready to put on the market. If you want to be effective at presenting the home in a way in which buyers will appreciate and will appreciate the price that you want for that home.
I mean, on our end, we see that too. Yeah. 100%. Favorite neighborhood or area to work in and why?
Well, I like Smithfield Estates a lot because I've had quite a bit of success in helping clients sell their homes in the neighborhood. I connect with the client base there. I like the homes. I think the homes are attractive to a lot of people. So that's a nice neighborhood.
Is that the one that we are in a lot? The Robert Adams neighborhood?
Yes. It's a very nice neighborhood. And I like working in that neighborhood. I like the people there.
Yeah.
I like the homes. I like the way they're presented. I like the type of people that come to look at those homes. It's from that standpoint, that's probably a neighborhood I like the most.
I see that the neighbors seem to get to know you there as you keep racking up these listings.
They do.
In there.
Well, I have friends also in that neighborhood, so sometimes we're invited to the social events. So it's a very nice connection that we have there.
What is a unique or most unique feature you've seen in a home that really stood out? I have one from one of your shoots that's in my head, but what would you say?
Clearly, we had the house with the double outhouse. In which, the house was historic. It had been built in the 1700s, and it not only had an outhouse, but it had really, they were side-by-side outhouses, back-to-back. So they'd been built as one big outhouse with 4 seats. And you could see that clearly it was a family event to be able to go and use the outhouse.
Oh, man, I know. Well, at least hopefully there's proper ventilation. Is that the one that the first shots of the Battle of Brandywine were?
That's the one where the Battle of Brandywine took place, yes.
That's the house I was thinking of, but the feature that stood out to me was the hole in the wall from the cannonballs. That was pretty cool.
That was nice there where they had the cannonball. It was actually, they had it encased in glass. That had been shot during the battle, and they had embedded itself into the brick wall there. That house had a lot of very, very unique aspects to it, much of which was around either that period of time or the battle or things of that nature. Lafayette had gone to that house 50 years later. There was a tremendous amount of history with that house.
Yeah, that was a cool one. That's one of the cool parts of what we do is some of the stuff that we see. We've I would say probably about like 4 or 5 homes that I've shot personally had like the basement was part of the Underground Railroad.
As it was over there.
That was one of them, yeah.
And I have a similar one right now. We have a listing over in West Grove, of which it too was part of the Underground Railroad, and it's another historic home. It was the home of Ann Preston, who was the first female doctor in Pennsylvania to like establish a school for medicine for women in this area. So
Very cool.
lots of history around here.
Yeah. No, we live in an awesome area. Biggest mistake you see first-time home buyers make?
Not realizing you're going to get rejected. Okay. If you look at the fact that we have, I'll make an editorial comment here, is that in the era of participation trophies, okay, we have taken away the concept of that there are winners and there are losers, okay, and that's really life. When you're out buying homes, I will tell you, there are winners and there are losers because you don't get every house that you put an offer in on. And sometimes that is a difficult concept for some of these first-time buyers to understand, is that just because you put an offer in doesn't mean it's going to get accepted, because there are better offers out there. And there could be, those better offers could be the ones that are going against your offer.
What would you say is the most challenging aspect of being a realtor? And what do you do to overcome it?
In many people's mind, it's an appreciation or understanding of the value we bring. I think that, and realtors, I think, are the biggest contributors to that problem. When realtors start putting social media out there about how easy it was to sell the house, how little work they had to do, or they're working but they're sitting on a beach somewhere in another part of the country, but they're still able to work, or you've got what you see on $1 Million Listing and all the money that's supposed to be being made. And what is not really being reflected is the amount of work that's necessary in order to really prepare a home, get a home under contract, which is difficult, but probably not the hardest part of the job. The hardest part of the job is actually taking it from contract to close and working through all of the things that may come up. It isn't just whether or not they ask for inspections or repairs or things of that nature. It's dealing with municipalities, dealing with appraisers, dealing with things that are unique to that property, which it's very difficult for a seller to understand that every property is unique, and there's certain things about that property that may or may not cause some hiccup in the process. And a good realtor handles many of those things behind the scenes in which the client doesn't see them, because we know they're going to get handled and we know how to work through the objections. And in doing so, it's tough to market and promote how effective you were in helping somebody get their home sold when they don't see all that work that went behind. So it's difficult, I think, for the consumer to appreciate the value that is brought to get that accomplished, except if they ever tried it themselves. Yeah. Then they know.
I 100% agree with you. When I had my license, I always would explain to people, I said, we earn our money from once you go under contract to close, because that's where a lot of the complexity and dealing with a lot of challenges and whatnot occurs. I mean, I'm 100% in your camp as far as that perspective goes. But wouldn't you say that the when a buyer or seller is saying how easy it was to do to get what they wanted, is actually a result of the quality of realtor they're working with? Because if it was easy, it means the realtor did a pretty good job in most cases.
I think that the easier it appears, the more work that was really done by the realtor, or the more experience the realtor had in making sure that the risks were reduced or eliminated, the potential problems were taken care of in advance. It's easier. I want to say it's easy, but it's easier to, in a market like this, to take a home and put it on the market and really do little and have a bunch of people come and they say they want it because of the nature of the market. But it doesn't necessarily mean that agent is as effective as they need to be. Because maybe they could have packaged that property differently. Maybe they could have gotten a little bit more, or maybe they didn't communicate the risks that take place when a seller takes an offer and with the inspections have been waived, that the seller may still bear some risk out there because there may be an issue with disclosures, or maybe at some point in time the buyer may feel as though they've gotten taken advantage of. And so some additional risk is there. Was that communicated to the seller during this whole process in the preparing the home and getting ready to take an offer? I think that deficiency in making sure the seller understands all the potential dynamics that are out there so they can make the right decisions for them and for their property, even though they still may be taking that offer and going forward in the same manner. At least they understand the risks that are present out there. I think those are the things that are not communicated.
The perception that something's easy and, resulting from, actions taken or not taken by a realtor, that's one thing. But I guess let's look at it from the perspective of whether or not the client appreciates everything that went into it. Is that a result of agents not doing as good a job as they could articulating their value and what they bring to the table? And should agents be working on that, especially with upcoming stuff with NAR?
It should be. You're going to have to demonstrate your value. Here's what buyers and agents that are working with buyers, I think, need to understand. When on the listing side, when we're selling the home, for quite some time, maybe since the beginning of all of this, agents have had to sit down with the consumer, with the client, and talk to them about the value they bring in helping them sell their home. And this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to position the home. This is how we're going to market it, price it, get you to close. And quite a bit of work is being done. Hours of work and maybe, hours of meetings with the consumer, with the client, to get them to develop a level of trust, confidence, and understanding this is what you're going to do to earn that commission or that fee for that service. On the buy side, that has not really been done as much because the buying agent has always been confident that their pay really isn't coming from the buyer. Even though technically it is through the buyer's contract, they know that they're really getting paid from the listing broker side and through the co-op and the MLS.
Yep.
So they haven't spent a whole lot of time trying to convince the buyer or work with the buyer about the value that is required and that they provide to help them be able to find a house. Now they have to. And the buyer is also going to have to invest time in determining the right type of agent for them. The one that's going to be gaining their trust, confident they're in their abilities, and their ability to help them navigate a very complex environment. Because now the buyer is potentially the one that's going to have to pay for that agent's services.
During my real estate career, I when I started out, before I really knew anything, when I was dealing with buyers, I would run into issues as far as how buyers can squirrel, they can go all over the place. But one thing that I learned to do pretty quickly was actually sit down with them, have a consultation, and before we started doing anything, and actually review the buyer's contract. I know a lot of agents that don't do that contract until they're under, or the buyer agency agreement. They don't deal with that until they're under contract. Right. A lot of them don't put any value in it, but I found that the buyers took it more seriously once that was reviewed. It's just you're setting a tone, and also the one little piece that says, assuming that the commission isn't coming from the seller, that this is what you're going to owe me.
Correct.
I think that part of that agreement is now going to be much more relevant with the upcoming
Well, it'll be discussed in much more detail,
Right.
for certain. Buyer's consultations is something that Jay and I have done right from the get-go. That's how we were trained. That's how we help educate our clients. And our buyer's consultations are known to be at least an hour long, sometimes hour and a half or more, because we want the buyer to understand all of what we can convey to them in that time frame about what it means to be a buyer in this, and what it also means to have an agent out there working for you.
What's the benefit to the buyer for the longevity of the process of them purchasing a home from an agent that takes the time to do that? What is it versus an agent who doesn't do that?
I think the buyer has not been explained to the buyer a couple things that I think the contract and having a buyer's agency agreement in place is important. Okay. First and foremost, once you have a contract with an agent, there's a confidentiality. You're bound to confidentiality. Okay. And until then, if you're in Pennsylvania, there's some question about whether or not you really have to maintain any confidentiality if you don't have an agreement in place. Right. You can convey to the client their rights as a consumer and what agency you represent, but you don't have anything that binds you to that. Secondly, the contract also creates a fiduciary relationship, meaning that the interests of the client come first and foremost over the interests of anybody else, including the agent. So if you have that in place, the buyer should feel more confident that the agent is working for them, okay, and not working for himself or herself.
Do you think that increases trust overall? And the confidence, yes.
It has to. I think it increases trust from both parties. I think it increases trust from the agent to the buyer, because we know that in the past we've seen buyers not want to make a commitment to an agent. They will call up anybody they can to look at a house. And in fact, even if they say they've been working with somebody, if some opportunity comes up and they think they can take advantage of that, they'll reach right out to a listing agent or grab somebody that'll be able to show them a house, or go to Zillow and take anybody that put them in. So there's a level of distrust between agents and buyers that clearly can get cemented with an agreement.
We talked ahead of this about some things that you're really good at. And one of the things that you expressed to me was that you're really good at understanding the needs of buyers, getting to know what they're looking to accomplish and helping them make the best decision and not regret it after the fact. Mm-hmm. So speak a little more to that.
We are a referral-based business. So that's our construct. So we don't do cold calling. We don't do a whole lot of door knocking. Our business is based upon relationships and having a great experience with our clients, and our clients having a great experience in either buying or selling their house. So we have a vested interest that the person that's buying the house loves their house. They like the experience, but more importantly, they like where they're going to be living. They like where they live. It's satisfying their needs and then exceeding those expectations. That's the only way they're going to tell somebody else to use us, right, or tell somebody else about that. So I want to understand more than just what they think they need. We're going to start asking some questions. That's my consulting background. We're going to do some probing. We're going to ask, where do you see yourself in 5 years? When the kids grow, if you have children, and that's an important part of what it is we're looking for this particular house. How do you envision them growing up in here? Do you realize that children turn into adults? Okay, so if can you imagine not having 3 kids in here, but having 3 adults when they become teenagers or going to college? How are they going to fit into this house? How does this work location-wise with the support things you need? Since we're not originally from here, when we moved out here, I was traveling a lot. Jane had to figure out a whole support network. Where are the doctors? Okay, where am I going to go shopping? Where are the kids going to play? Where are the schools? And sometimes buyers don't think of some of those aspects of it. They see a house that looks like it's got the bedrooms they want or the kitchen they want, or God forbid they see some flip that they think that they got to move into. And they're not understanding this is about where you're going to live, and it's an ecosystem, it's a community. And we want to make sure that their finances are lined up for this. And we want to make sure that they're going to feel comfortable in the home and not have to rely on, hopefully, some interest rates coming down and potentially refinancing for them to be able to feel comfortable in the home. That's not the way to buy a home today.
Right.
Those are our unrealistic expectations. So we spend a lot of time understanding that so that we know what they're looking for, and we can also challenge them when they throw something our way, and we'll say, well, you said this, or what about this? What has changed in your rubric that's different? And if it has, that's fine. But if it hasn't, we want to also explore and say, are you just doing this because now you think you have to settle?
Basically, the process essentially starts with the initial fact finding. So you guys know at least where they are at baseline when they start the process. And then past that, you're like, let's say they like, oh, we want this, this, and this. And then they maybe, especially in this market, maybe they get a little antsy from being rejected a few times and then just want to get it over with, but might go in a different direction. So as opposed to just maybe you could put them in a house at that point, but you're taking the time to say, okay, well, that's fine. We could do this, but this is what you told us. This doesn't exactly line up. And, are you sure this is
right
where the direction you want to go? Okay.
I'll add one thing is that we will also tell our buyers or advise our buyers when it's not to buy the house. Okay. There are things about the house that maybe they are either overlooking or not taking into full account, that it could have issues in the future.
So you're flat out, in some cases, you're saying this isn't a good buy. If you believe so.
Yes.
Yeah.
They can still put an offer. I'm not going to stop from doing that, but I want to at least make sure they understand that there are things about the house that I think that are concerning.
So at least you did your job, even if they choose to move forward.
I hope that not only do they look that we did our job, even if they choose to move forward, I hope they take our counsel enough to know that we are, as I said before, as a fiduciary, trying to put their interests ahead of ours. Because there's a lot of agents out there that I think will just sell anybody anything the first thing they see, and they get the deal done, they move on.
Yeah.
We don't do that.
For some agents, I know that they will, when you're showing a crap load of houses, you got to be like, ugh, at some point, a lot of agents got to be like, we got to get one done. But to actually be able to put the client first in a situation where, it's just as laboring for you as it is for the buyers in some cases, especially the way, the market is now. But I think that says a lot for, the agents. And you're not the first person that brings that up. I mean, I do know people who, it's just like, hey, got another one under contract. But I do, have talked with some agents recently who are like, yeah, I'll tell people not to buy the house, if I see the issues. Let's talk a little bit about pricing strategy. Okay. And I think you'll be, I'm interested to hear how you approach this, because especially from an analytical, in conversations we've had, you're always looking at numbers and things like that. A lot of people will, do the basics, run comps and things like that. What do you do differently or do better than the basics on your end?
We gather a lot of data on a regular basis. I'm pulling a lot of the history and the information from the MLS into our own database. We have our own databases that are churning through data and tracking things. So I break it down both by county and school district, and we can tell people absorption rate for any school district at any given time and the history of it, because I think trends are just as important as what's going on today. I want to see, we've got seasonal trends, we've got marketplace trends, we've got things that took place pre-COVID, post-COVID. So I can tell you all absorption rates. I can tell you list price, sold price ratios for every school district for the past 5 years. At any given time of year, any month, I can look and give you an idea of what percentage of sales were at ask or better. Of those that were ask or better, were they 5% or less or 5% or more? How many of them were 10% or more? So I can get a good feel of the market, what kind of pricing is going to be allowable or acceptable or tolerated by the buying community or selling community in this environment. I can see what trends are taking place. So I think that's an important aspect. The other thing I want to look at is we are in an era of still increasing prices. And we have a lot of homeowners who have not sold their home in a long period of time. They just had PAR just released saying that 34.6% of all homeowners in Pennsylvania have been in their home 24 years or more. That's a long time. Third highest in the nation. New York is 1, Hawaii is 2. I can understand not wanting to leave Hawaii. And I can understand I can't understand why you want to stay in New York. So if I look at a neighborhood, I want to sense if a neighborhood may be at the beginning of a turn. And so I want to look at, if I'm on the buy side and I'm looking at a house that came out of a neighborhood and it's priced probably at market, but it's probably going to go over, is the next house that's going to come on probably going to be more. So if we're early in a neighborhood that's turning, it may be better for a buyer to get that house, probably pay more than what's being asked, maybe more than maybe what you would think, on the assumption that the next house coming on will be higher, and the next house after that will be higher. And especially if it hasn't turned, you're going to see neighbors going on and say, hey, the Joneses just got $600,000 for their house. Our house is a hell of a lot better from them. We're going to go at $650,000. And somebody will pay $650,000. And then the next one will be like $675,000. So that first or second house in the neighborhood that's turning, it's worth going after and securing, even if you think you're paying more than what the value is at that time, because the next houses will give you equity without you having to do anything.
That's a good way to look at it.
Conversely, if I'm looking at maybe the 6th or 7th or 8th house that has turned in that neighborhood, that appreciation level is going to be slowing down, and you're not going to see the same level of increase. So you may be wanting to stick around where the asking price is or not much more, because it's going to be tough for the next house come on to justify the value, because you've had such a rapid run up in the past, 3-4 years, 30%, 40%.
So that sounds like you're talking about more if you're on the buy end of that, right? It is approach to offers.
On the buy end, but I'm also going to be looking at on the sell side too. Well, what is the market going to tolerate? So on the sell side, I'm going to be looking at pricing. There's 3 different concepts of the pricing. There's this aspirational pricing, where it's some number that is probably above what everybody thinks the value is, and you're going to try it. If you get it, you don't. But if somebody offers something a little less, you'll negotiate and take it. And that's not usually where we price. There's market level pricing, where you have done a lot of this analysis and say, this is where I think the market is going to look at this house and say, the seller's expectations are realistic. We as buyers, the buyers know pricing and the market very, very well. They are very attuned. So they look at that and say, for the condition, for the location, for the area, the price looks right, market level pricing. And then you have another level of pricing would be like event level pricing, where you price it fairly significant below where you think the market is and try to create an auction type of environment or a buzz. So,
what are you seeing more of right now? of those three?
Market level pricing. They're still getting activity, and we price it market level pricing, and maybe just a hair under.
Okay.
I'm not in the big event. I'm not going to price it. I really don't recommend pricing like 10% below where I think the market is.
What I seem to be noticing, I always talk to my clients and shoot the shit over what's going on with their strategy. And I think you're right. You're seeing a lot of the market level pricing, but why do you not like the event pricing?
I think you create a level of disappointment to the buying community. You create really something that's unrealistic out there, and you piss off the buying community. You piss off the agents.
How so?
Because let's say you have a $400,000 house. You think the market value of the house is $400,000, and you price it at $325,000. Okay, you got a bunch of people who are pre-approved for $325,000, looking at a house of which there's no way in hell they're going to get, and you've got a bunch of people out there who are working really hard to try to find houses. I mean, the buyers are really at a disadvantage. And you got a bunch of agents really working their ass off, trying to help their clients get a house.
Is a good way to look at that, that, okay, because you're pricing at 75 below market value, right? That pricing strategy is more geared towards getting buyers that are approved for more to go above and beyond, but the price is going to attract people who, when all said and done and final offers taken, never stood a chance in the beginning.
Correct.
Okay.
You're trying to pull in those ones that will pay more.
You're giving false hope to the people who
Now you're giving false hope. And yes, I know we're working for the seller. But why create a whole bunch of noise and bring in a whole bunch of offers from people who aren't going to play? I mean, do I want... if you get past 10 offers on a house, they all start looking fairly similar.
Yeah.
So why do I need 30 offers on a house? I mean, it does nobody any good.
I see your point, but I do see it work when people do it. So buyers aside, working for the seller if you aren't considering the buyers, and how they're going to feel about it, is it beneficial to the seller to do that?
I believe we can still get the maximized price for the seller and the maximized terms if we take that $400,000 house and price it at $390,000, $395,000. In this market, in this environment, I am fairly certain we will generate a significant number of offers that will exceed the expectations of the seller.
Okay. Yeah,
and they will be also stronger buyers because I will have all those 325 buyers are weak. They're weak in the game.
So you're saying, let's say with those 325 buyers, let's say you got 10 or 15 offers, there might be a significant percentage of those 10 or 15 that just aren't worth looking at. So really...
Yeah, but they need to be looked at. I mean, we do due diligence, but you're correct. They're going to be weak. They're just not be players.
Right. So you might only have 4 or 5 that are like where you wanted to get it anyway.
Correct.
Okay. Now, I've heard from a lot of agents recently, they're getting 6 figures over ask. A lot. Well, I wouldn't say like a lot, but like enough that it's like noticeable that I'm hearing a lot of that. What's your take on that?
Well, what price point?
Over pushing 7.
It's a lot. I can't. We do not know who all the buyers are that are out there, and we cannot predict what somebody's drive, motivation, or how much money they want to spend on something. It's more than likely if somebody's spending $100,000 over are willing to offer $100,000 over a $700,000 house, which would put them at the 8% to 9% type of thing. Well, they're over 10 on that, so they're probably like 12 or 14. More than likely, they're cash, and so they are not interest rate sensitive,
Okay.
which is significant. Which also means they're not payment sensitive, which is significant, because that's a significant difference in payment amount when you go that much over and increase your borrow that much.
Okay.
They are then going to take the risk of appraisal and things of that nature. And they'll provide the support and, make the seller feel comfortable that if it doesn't appraise, they'll still cover the difference. I think we cannot account for what I would consider stupid money, because it still exists. And we can't stop people from taking something out that is far and above what's out there. I think when that gets advertised and broadcast, it creates an expectation that that is the norm, when I still think that those still are the exceptions. There are things going on now over ask, but when you start getting over 10%, that's a big lift.
Yeah. The one thing that kind of put that on my radar a little bit was like, even during like the craziness in the last couple, 2-3 years, people were going over ask significantly, but like 6 figures. I heard one was like 250 over ask, one was like 100 and something over ask. I mean, that's crazy. And that's, you're right. There probably are cash, and I think a few of them are. But yeah, man, how do you compete with that?
Well, you can't. And you just have to walk away and just say, I mean, there's downsides to all of that, because we saw some of that taking place, in 2021 and 2022. And now we're seeing some of those homes come back on the market because those people made probably irresponsible decisions, or they had some event take place in their life that they never thought was going to take place, and they have to sell the house a lot faster. They are not getting that same level of money, and they're going to be difficult for them to even get the money they paid for it.
Yeah.
So over time, you have to take into account, if you pay $100,000 over ask on a property today, and you tried to sell it a year from now, you may not get that money.
No. Yeah, that's the one thing that, like, people, I always thought that that was crazy, that some of the money people are paying for these houses, because like, yeah, it's fine and dandy. You'll probably in the long term, you'll come out, okay.
Mm-hmm.
But, people move, people have life-changing events, and like, you have to sell. It's like, man, it's like you're going to be kicking yourself in the butt.
You may be able to make that justification in the scenario I talked about before. Maybe it's a neighborhood that hasn't turned, and this is the first house that's going to be sold in the neighborhood. True. Okay. You may have an opportunity then, in which other homes, when they come on, they're going to go higher and they're going to pull you up, and you'll be fine. But if you're in a different type of scenario and that doesn't exist, you may be sitting out there naked.
Yeah. Or like you said, in the event pricing, I mean, if they went 75 below and then they paid 100, I guess it's not that bad.
Right.
Yeah, so that could be that case too.
Things all have to be put into the perspective. And unfortunately, both in the social media marketing and the seller's perception and the consumer's perception, they see that, and the context of that particular situation is not either revealed, understood, or presented. You just don't know. We could have a scenario. I had a property once where it was up in Glenside, and we priced it right around market value. It was in the low threes, 328 or something like that. And we put out there, had a tremendous amount of activity. I think we had 18 offers on the property. And there was a person that really, really wanted the house and offered, and he was like 30 over, 40 over, something like that. Waived everything. His parents lived around the area. He was from outside the area. But his mother had been diagnosed with cancer. And he wanted to come back to the area to be close to her so he could support her. And this home offered that opportunity because it was like right in the street over. So the value of that house to him was considerably different to the other 17 people that wrote an offer. Mm-hmm. And there wasn't a price that he probably wasn't willing to pay in order for that opportunity. So we just don't know the context of why somebody is paying this money or how come they're paying more. We just don't know.
Right. And I think that kind of speaks to the value of you being really digging into the analytics and really looking at the market, because you're going to be able to, help your clients really navigate these things better than somebody that's just looking very surface level at the pricing. Okay. And then as far as the aspirational pricing, as you call it, back in the day, it used to be like, yeah, you're smoking something wanting to list at these prices, if somebody wanted to go very high. But how do you tell a seller now that they're crazy when people see and hear some of the stuff going on? Is it something that you just have, as a listing agent, you might have to test the waters on the client's behalf? Or is it something, and is it harder to talk them off that ledge than maybe it was in the past, knowing the state of the market?
One of the things that we can do when we talk with our sellers is we have all this data. We have all this analysis. We have a tremendous amount of information that nobody else is presenting to them. So we can get them into a zone of where we think the pricing is going to be. And if they have something that's way out of whack, we will have a dialogue with them saying, one, I don't see how you're going to get that. With the property the way it is or something of that nature. We'll be able to get that if we do X. Maybe we can do some things to position the property in a manner or do some improvements on the property so that people could see maybe where you're coming up with that price. I like to communicate to the sellers that I don't think there's a penalty today for underpricing your house. Not that I'm going to purposely underprice it. I'm going to price it as where I think the best position is for the market for buyers to come. I'll follow on that thought in 1 second here. The market, as we've said before, we don't know where the buyers are coming from. And there are far more buyers. And the demand for homes is so great. The market will bring your house up. If you price it correctly, the market will pull it up to whatever value they believe. Market value is when I have a buyer and seller actually come to an agreement. That's market value. Until then, we're doing the best we can to try to figure out where it is.
Is it safe to say or fairly safe to say in this market, regardless of your pricing strategy, the home's going to end up where it's going to end up regardless?
It is, for the most part. I think that, like I said before, I don't think there's a penalty today for mispricing the house on the downside. And I say mispricing, I don't purposely misprice, but if you misprice on the upside, there is a penalty.
Yep. For somebody who doesn't know what you mean by penalty on the downside, what do you mean by that? What penalty could there be?
Somebody taking it out at that price. You think you're going to price it a little bit lower than what the market is, and somebody coming in with an offer that matches that. I don't see that today.
No, I agree with you.
I would see multiple people coming in and saying, because here's a couple things you need to keep in mind. One, the buyers start thinking they have to pay ask and then go up. They know ask is the starting point, and they have to try to figure out how they are going to either find the money or craft the offer or do something for them to pay more, and how that's going to be done, and how much more they're going to have to do to get the house. It's not like they look at the house and say, I want to pay less. Okay. Sellers who haven't sold a home in 40 years still think in that mindset of I price it at X and then somebody's negotiating me down. Today is I price it at X and we're going up.
Yeah.
So if you misprice on the upside, the problem is the buyers look at that and say, They already want a lot. And now they're expecting us to pay more. We're not doing it. We're not
And then
going to
they
the
can
house.
look at other stuff that's going on in the market and see that they're a little ridiculous with that.
They know the pricing. Buyers know the market and the pricing better than anyone, including, I think, many of the agents.
Yeah. I tend to agree with you.
So the other part I wanted to add on to that, if I could, is
Sure.
our objective is to create a presentation of the home, a marketing of the home, and a pricing of the home such that when people see it from the internet, because that's where they start, using your photography as the way to be able to highlight that property. If they schedule a showing, I think the reality, it's more than the perception. I think the reality is that they are taking the time out. They've seen a lot of homes. It's a pain in the ass for them to go out and look at homes. They've got to do something with the kids. They got to figure out work. They got to make all sorts of arrangements. If they are going to allocate time to come look at your home, and they've seen everything, and they're well aware of the market, there's a good chance they're already thinking in their head, this could be the home for us.
Yeah.
So they're already thinking about, if they're doing all of that, they're already thinking about, we could be making an offer on this home. If I get a bunch of people coming to a house and scheduling showings and getting activity, I know we're in the zone. I know the market looks at this home and says, you're spot on. We're coming to this because we think this is going to be one for us. It isn't like we're coming to this like, oh, we're out looking around. We're going to look at multiple homes and all that stuff. There are no multiple homes to look at.
You're going to know pretty quickly in
If
this market.
they're lucky to get a showing.
Yeah, I see. Especially where we live, if you're not getting activity, you did something wrong.
Exactly. And that's the message you have to give the sellers. Like, okay, you want your aspirational price, which, you could get lucky, but lucky isn't a strategy. If we don't see activity in 5 or 6 days, we're cutting the price.
Right. Yeah, I think that's kind of how, that was at least how I was always taught. Like, you deal with that type of scenario. It's like, if you gotta prove it to them, fine, but at least have like an expectation. Like, this is what should happen if we're gonna be able to accomplish that. Mm-hmm. And if not, then it only hurts you not to adjust quickly in a timely manner.
And we say quickly, in the past, it used to be like 30 days.
Yeah.
Now it's, if you're not getting
like
activity
2 or
in
3
a week,
days. Yeah.
if you're not getting activity in a week, you've got something wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Vince, I think that is that's a lot of good insight into pricing right now. And I think you nailed it. And I think a lot of agents, I know a lot of agents who do a good job of pricing, but I think your approach is definitely is one that probably helps you find success pretty regularly.
I will tell you, Brian, and this is just, it's anecdotal. It's nothing more, is that I have other agents from other firms call me to validate the pricing they're doing for homes, especially for different homes.
You're one of the guys they call, huh?
I'm one of the guys they call. Or I'm called when somebody's having a problem trying to get the house moved or something of that nature. And they'll ask our opinion. They do the same thing with Jane. It's like, because they know we focus so much on positioning, packaging, marketing, and pricing the home correctly.
So we're going to wrap up, but I do ask all of our guests to give us a positive message to the world.
I like the motto that Real has. It's work hard, be kind. I think if we were all a little kinder out there and give everybody a little more grace, it'd be easier to get through your day. And we all could use a little grace. And if you can't figure out who that person in your life is who needs the grace, it's you. Okay? So that's, I think that if we take a little bit of time each day to maybe not react quickly, not assume people are trying to do wrong to you. Maybe they just have a misunderstanding. Maybe if we try to understand some things from their perspective before we go jump to conclusions, I bet you our day personally will probably be easier, and the days of the people around us will be.
I love that. Well, thank you very much, Vince. Good conversation.
Thank you, Brian. This has been very enjoyable.
Yep.
So you got a great studio here.
Thank you very much.